The day my own son looked me straight in the eye and said, "You're useless now." Something inside me didn't explode, it collapsed. Not with shouting. Not with tears. But with a quiet, heavy realization that the man I raised no longer saw me as his father, only as a retired body taking up space. My name is William Carter. I'm 67 years old. Before you see what happens next in my life, subscribe to this channel. And while you're here, tell me in the comments which city or country you're watching from. If you've ever felt ignored, disrespected, or slowly erased by your own family after retirement, I want you to know, you're not alone. I gave this family everything. 42 years of my life. Missed holidays. Missed anniversaries. Missed school plays and birthdays. Also, my son would never have to struggle the way I did. I started working when I was 19. A small manufacturing plant on the edge of town. Loud machines, grease-stained hands, 12-hour shifts. I stayed because quitting wasn't an option, not when my wife, Eleanor, and our newborn son were counting on me. Every promotion I earned, every extra dollar I saved, every bone in my body that ached by the end of the day, I told myself it was worth it. Because one day, my son would stand taller than me. Smarter. Stronger. Safer. His name is Daniel. I still remember the day he graduated college. He shook my hand instead of hugging me. I told myself he was just nervous. Proud. Grown. Looking back, that was the first crack. When I turned 65, the company threw me a retirement party. Cheap cake. A plastic plaque. A handshake from a manager young enough to be my grandson. Still, I smiled. I thought retirement meant peace. Time with family. Maybe a little respect. Instead, it marked the moment I became invisible. At first, it was small things. Daniel stopped asking for advice. Stopped telling me about his work. When I tried to offer an opinion, he'd smile politely and say, "Times are different now, Dad." Different slowly turned into dismissive. Then came the money conversations. One evening, Daniel sat across from me at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd helped him with homework, where Eleanor and I planned our future. He tapped his fingers impatiently and said, "Dad, since you're retired now, you should really think about transferring things over. You know, just in case." I asked him what he meant. He sighed. Loudly. Like I was wasting his time. The house. The land. The accounts. It just makes sense. That was the first time I felt it, the shift in power. Not concern. Not love. Calculation. I told him I wasn't ready. That I was still alive. Still capable. He laughed. Actually laughed. And then he said it. "Come on, Dad. What do you even do all day?" "You're basically useless now." The word hit harder than any punch I'd ever taken. Useless. The man who taught him to ride a bike. Who worked overtime to pay his tuition. Who skipped meals so he could afford Daniel's first car. Useless. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I just nodded slowly, because somewhere deep inside, I felt ashamed for even needing to defend myself. That night, I sat alone in my room long after the lights were out. Eleanor's picture sat on the dresser. She passed away 3 years earlier, and without her, the house felt colder. Quieter. I whispered. Did I really become nothing? From that day on, Daniel changed completely. He started making decisions for me instead of with me. He spoke over me when relatives visited. He introduced me as my retired dad, like it was a warning label. Then one afternoon, he came home unusually calm. Too calm. He placed a folder on the table and slid it toward me. Just a few papers, Dad. Need your signature. I looked at the documents. Legal language. Small print. Titles and terms that made my head spin. What are these? I asked. He leaned back, crossed his arms, and smiled, the kind of smile that isn't warm at all. Just business. You wouldn't understand. That's why I need you to sign. That was the moment something inside me finally woke up. Because useless men don't get asked for signatures. And whatever those papers were, they mattered. I told him I'd read them first. His face changed instantly. Annoyance. Then anger. Why are you being difficult? He snapped. Don't you trust your own son? Trust. That word used to mean something. I took the papers to my room that night and read every single line slowly, carefully. And with every page, my hands started to shake. Because what Daniel wanted me to sign wasn't small. It wasn't simple. It was everything. The house. The land. My remaining savings. Control. If I signed those papers, I wouldn't just be retired. I'd be erased. And that's when I made a decision, one that would change my son's life forever. But Daniel didn't know that yet. He thought I was old. Weak. Useless. He had no idea that the man he dismissed was about to remind him of something very important. Because retirement doesn't end a father's strength. Sometimes, it's when it finally gets focused. And the signature he wanted so badly? It was never going to be as easy as he thought. I didn't sleep that night. Those papers sat on my desk like a quiet threat. Every sentence felt designed to confuse, to rush, to trap. Daniel knew exactly what he was doing. He was counting on one thing, that I'd feel too old, too tired, too embarrassed to question him. By morning, I'd made up my mind. I folded the documents neatly, placed them back in the folder, and walked into the kitchen like everything was normal. Daniel was already there, scrolling on his phone, coffee untouched. So? He asked without looking up. You sign? I set the folder on the table. No. He finally looked at me. His jaw tightened. What do you mean, no? He said. Dad, don't start this. I read every page, I replied calmly. And I won't sign something that gives you control over my entire life. He stood up so fast his chair scraped loudly across the floor. This is exactly what I mean, he snapped. You don't understand modern finances. This is for your own good. For my own good? I repeated. It leaves me with nothing. No authority. No protection. He scoffed. Protection from what? You can barely manage your own bills anymore. That hurt, but I didn't show it. Instead, I asked him a simple question. Why the rush? He froze for just a second. Barely noticeable. But I saw it. There is no rush, he said quickly. I'm just trying to help. That was the moment I knew something bigger was going on. Over the next few days, Daniel became someone I barely recognized. He stopped pretending to be patient. Every conversation turned sharp. Every sentence sounded like an accusation. You're holding me back. You're being selfish. You don't contribute anymore. One night during dinner, he dropped his fork and said it outright. If Mom were alive, she'd agree with me. That sentence cut deeper than anything else. I stood up without another word and went to my room. I locked the door. And for the first time since Eleanor passed, I cried. Not because I was weak, but because I finally understood. I wasn't dealing with a son anymore. I was dealing with someone who saw me as an obstacle. The next morning, I made a call I never thought I'd have to make. An old friend from the factory, Henry Lawson. We hadn't talked much since retirement, but he answered on the first ring. Will? He said warmly. You all right? I need a lawyer, I said. A good one. He didn't ask questions. He just gave me a name. That afternoon, I sat across from a woman named Margaret Fields, a calm, sharp-eyed attorney who didn't rush me once. I told her everything. The papers. Daniel's behavior. The pressure. She read the documents silently, her expression growing more serious with each page. Mr. Carter, she said finally, if you sign this, you lose control over your assets immediately. Your son becomes your legal authority. I nodded. That's what I thought. She leaned forward slightly. And there's more. These documents are connected to a larger transaction. My heart sank. What kind of transaction? She turned her screen toward me. Daniel had applied for a major business loan, using my property as collateral. Without my signature, the deal was dead. Suddenly, everything made sense. The impatience. The insults. The urgency. I wasn't useless. I was inconvenient. Margaret looked at me carefully. Your son is counting on you feeling pressured. But legally, you're still in full control. I exhaled slowly, feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Clarity. What are my options? I asked. She smiled faintly. You have more power than you realize. Over the next week, we worked quietly. I updated documents Daniel didn't even know existed. Protections. Clauses. Safeguards Eleanor and I had once talked about but never finalized. All completely legal. All completely invisible to him. At home, Daniel grew colder. He stopped calling me Dad. He referred to me as him when talking to others, while I was still in the room. One evening, I overheard him on the phone. Don't worry, he said confidently. He'll sign. He doesn't have a choice. That night, I packed a small bag and moved into the guest room. Not because I was afraid, but because I was done pretending. A few days later, Daniel stormed into the house waving his phone. They need the signature by Friday, he said sharply. This is serious. So am I replied. He slammed the folder down again. You think you're teaching me a lesson? You're ruining my future. I looked at him, really looked at him. And I said quietly, You stopped caring about my future a long time ago. He stared at me stunned. That's when I realized something important. This wasn't about revenge. This was about dignity. And I wasn't done yet. Because the man my son called useless was about to do something he never expected. And the signature he wanted? It was going to come with consequences he never planned for. The silence in that house became unbearable after that conversation. Daniel stopped pretending altogether. No more fake smiles. No more polite words. He treated me like a tenant who had overstayed his welcome. He'd come home late, slam doors, talk loudly on the phone about his future, his company, his plans, never once mentioning me, except as a problem yet to be solved. But what he didn't know was this. While he was busy building castles in the air, I was quietly reclaiming the ground beneath my feet. Every morning, I left the house early. I told him I was going for walks, letting my joints loosen, letting my mind rest. That wasn't a lie. But those walks ended at Margaret Field's office. We went through everything: old deeds, bank records, insurance policies, retirement accounts. Things Eleanor and I had built over decades. Things I had never imagined I'd need to defend from my own son. Margaret was careful. Precise. Your son assumes you're emotionally dependent, she said one morning. That makes him careless. I nodded. He thinks I won't fight back. She looked up. Are you ready to? I didn't answer right away. Because fighting your own child doesn't feel like strength. It feels like failure. But then I remembered Daniel's face when he called me useless. The coldness in his voice. The way he spoke about me like I was already gone. And I said, yes. The first thing we did was simple, but powerful. We separated my finances completely. New accounts. New access codes. Daniel's name removed. Next, we updated my will. Not out of anger. Out of reality. Margaret explained something that made my stomach tighten. If something happens to you right now, she said, your son gains everything, and control over your final decisions. That was when I realized how close I'd come to losing even my dignity at the end. So we changed it. Carefully. Legally. Quietly. I also appointed a medical and financial power of attorney. Not Daniel. Someone who would actually protect me. When Margaret slid the final documents across the desk, she paused. Are you sure? she asked gently. Once this is done, your relationship may never recover. I thought of Eleanor. Of the woman who once told me, raising a child doesn't mean surrendering yourself. I sighed. At home, Daniel noticed the shift. He started asking questions again, too many. Where are you going every morning? Why are the bank statements different? Who are you talking to on the phone? Concern? No. Suspicion. One evening, he blocked the hallway as I tried to pass. You're hiding something, he said. I met his eyes calmly. I'm protecting myself. He laughed. A short, sharp sound. From me? He asked. Don't be dramatic. That night, I overheard him arguing with someone on the phone. They changed the terms, he hissed. No, I don't know why. I'm working on it. Change the terms. That told me everything. His deal was already wobbling. A few days later, Margaret called me. They've contacted your bank, she said, trying to verify authorization. My chest tightened. And? They don't have it. For the first time in years, I felt something close to peace. Not victory. Control. At dinner that night, Daniel was unusually quiet. He picked at his food, barely touching it. Then suddenly he spoke. You know, he said, not looking at me. If you sign those papers, I can make sure you're taken care of. Comfortable. No worries. I set my fork down. I don't need to be taken care of, I replied. I need to be respected. He slammed his hand on the table. Respect is earned, he shouted. I looked at him steadily. I earned mine long before you were born. The room went silent. For a brief second, I saw something in his eyes. Fear. Because he finally realized something had changed. The old man he thought he controlled was gone, and the father he underestimated was standing right in front of him. Later that night, I packed important documents into a locked case and placed it under my bed. Not because I was running, but because I was preparing. Because soon, Daniel wouldn't be asking for my signature anymore. He'd be demanding it. And when that moment came, I would be ready. The pressure started the very next day. Daniel didn't raise his voice anymore. That worried me more than the shouting ever did. He became polite. Too polite. He made breakfast, asked how I slept, even called me Dad again. It felt rehearsed, like a mask pulled out of storage. That afternoon, he suggested we go for a drive. Just us, he said. Like old times. I almost laughed. But I agreed. Not because I trusted him, because I needed to see how far he'd go. We drove in silence for a while, then he pulled into a quiet cafe parking lot. He didn't turn off the engine. I'm under a lot of pressure, he said softly. People are depending on me. So am I replied. He sighed dramatically. You don't understand how the world works anymore. Deals fall apart fast. One signature could fix everything. There it is, I said. He clenched his jaw. Why are you doing this? I looked out the window for a moment, then back at him. Because you stopped seeing me as your father, I said. You saw me as a tool. His face hardened. Don't make this emotional, he snapped. This is business. That's the problem, I said quietly. Family shouldn't feel like business. He laughed bitterly. Family is business. You taught me that when you chose work over being home. That one landed. Because part of it was true. But then he crossed the line. If you don't sign, he said slowly, maybe it's time you consider assisted living. Somewhere safe. Somewhere managed. My blood ran cold. That's a threat, I said. It's a solution, he replied. You're not getting any younger. I stared at him, my own son, realizing just how far gone he was. When we got home, I went straight to my room and locked the door. That night I called Margaret. He's escalating, I said. He mentioned assisted living. Her voice sharpened instantly. That changes things. The next morning, she met me early. "We're going to protect you immediately," she said, "and document everything." From that moment on, every conversation with Daniel became evidence. Text messages, voicemails, dates, times, words. He didn't know it, but every manipulative sentence he spoke was tightening the net around himself. Then came the confrontation. Daniel came home furious, phone in hand. "They rejected the loan," he shouted. "Completely." I remained calm. "I'm sorry to hear that." "You did this," he yelled. "You sabotaged me." "No," I said. "I refuse to be exploited." He stepped closer. Too close. "You think you're being clever?" he hissed. "Without me, you're nothing." That was the moment something inside me settled. "I was something long before you," I said. "And I'll be something after this." He shoved the folder into my chest. "Sign. Now." I didn't move. "Get out of my way," he said. "This is still my house," I replied. For a second, I thought he might hit me. Instead, he did something worse. He smiled. "You'll regret this," he said quietly. "I promise." That night, I slept with my door locked. 2 days later, I received a letter. A legal notice. Daniel had filed paperwork claiming I was mentally unfit to manage my affairs. That was his final move. And the moment he did that, he crossed a line he could never uncross. Because now, this wasn't just a family matter. It was a courtroom one. And Daniel had no idea what evidence I had been collecting. No idea how prepared I was. No idea that the so-called useless man he tried to erase was about to speak louder than he ever had in his life. And this time, a judge would be listening. The courtroom was colder than I expected. Not in temperature, but in feeling. Daniel sat across the aisle from me, dressed in a sharp suit, whispering to his lawyer like he already owned the outcome. He didn't look at me. Not once. As if I were already erased. I sat quietly beside Margaret. Calm. Prepared. Ready. The judge entered, and the room stood. When we sat again, Daniel's lawyer spoke first. He painted a picture of an aging father. Confused. Emotionally unstable after his wife's death. Vulnerable to bad decisions. And then came the words that hurt the most. "For his own safety," the lawyer said, "Mr. Carter's assets should be placed under the care of his son." I closed my eyes for just a moment. Then Margaret stood. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't rush. She began with facts. Dates. Documents. Bank records. She presented evidence of Daniel's loan application, using my property as collateral without my consent. The judge leaned forward. Then came the messages. Printed emails. Text messages. Voicemails. One of them played out loud in the courtroom. Daniel's voice. "He doesn't have a choice. He'll sign." The room went silent. Margaret turned to the judge. "This is not concern," she said. "This is coercion." Daniel shifted in his seat for the first time. Then Margaret did something I'll never forget. She handed the judge a sealed envelope. "This," she said, "is Mr. Carter's updated medical and financial evaluation. Independent doctors. Clear assessments. Mentally sound. Fully capable." The judge nodded slowly. Then he looked at Daniel. "Mr. Carter," the judge said, "did you ever tell your father he was useless after retirement?" Daniel froze. His lawyer whispered urgently, but it was too late. "I may have said something like that," Daniel muttered. The judge removed his glasses. "You called a man who worked over 4 decades, who built the very assets you sought to control, useless?" Daniel said nothing. The judge turned to me. "Mr. Carter," he said gently, "do you wish to speak?" I stood. My legs were steady. "I didn't come here to punish my son," I said. I came here because I wanted to live the rest of my life with dignity. I looked directly at Daniel. I never refused to help you, I continued. I refused to be erased. The judge nodded once. Then he ruled. Daniel's petition was denied. Not only that, the court issued a formal warning against further financial manipulation. Daniel lost the loan, lost credibility, lost control, and most of all, he lost the power he thought he had over me. Outside the courtroom, Daniel tried to speak. Dad! I raised my hand. Stop, I said. I'm still your father. But I'm not your asset. I moved out of that house within a month. Not because I was forced. Because I chose peace. I bought a small place of my own. Quiet. Sunlight in the mornings. A garden Eleanor would have loved. Daniel and I speak rarely now. Not out of hatred. Out of boundaries. Because respect doesn't come from blood. It comes from behavior. And the signature my son wanted so badly? It turned out to be the one thing he never got. Because I learned something important late in life, but not too late. Retirement doesn't make a man useless. It reveals who around him was using him all along.